Thank you for tuning into our podcast, Canal Days, What Life is Like in the Industrial Connecticut River Valley of Massachusetts. I am your host, Carrie, and joining us today is Holyoke's very own local historian and creator of the historical tours of Greater Holyoke, Robert Como. He personally offers and leads public and private tours, as well as presentations of historical sites within communities throughout the state of Massachusetts. Currently, the communities he has chosen to focus on this year are Holyoke, Chicopee, South Hadley, and East Hampton, and also Granby and Amherst as well. Now his tours spotlight on the local canals, reservoirs, cemeteries, and churches, and also parks, streets, and selected historical houses within each community. And in today's episode, we will be discussing the Sisters of Providence. So how did the Sisters of Providence serve Holyoke?
We should say, how did they and how do they still? Because they still do, even after all these many years. This year, 2024, and last year in the year 2023, they celebrated the 150th year arrival into Holyoke from Kingston, Ontario province. And today we're going to talk about what the nuns do, where they live, and what they still do around Holyoke and the great vast area of western and central Massachusetts, and then what special event they celebrated last year. Now, the nuns, they do nursing. When they first came, they did some teaching. They do social workers, and they do a lot of work among the young people, and that part has changed, but they used to be in control of orphanages, and so they've done a lot of important work. And remember what Holyoke must have been like 150 years ago. There were parents that worked so hard at their jobs that it took up all their time, so they ran daycares. And they also were teachers in school, even though they weren't trained or wanted to do that, but they needed so much teaching to be done. And there was so many orphans around. They'd run orphanages. There were so many old people that couldn't afford to live on their own. They'd run old age homes. So it was incredible what they did, and they still do, but they changed with the times. The public, are expressed through Massachusetts and its entities, puts a lot of efforts into orphans, or the equivalent, and they put a lot of effort into schools, into hospitals, into daycares. But one thing they don't put enough effort into is people that with a drug addiction. And so the Sisters of Providence found a niche there where they can help out the people. So hopefully you'll get to see how much they've done.
And where did the Sisters of Providence live?
They would live wherever their work would be. If it was daycare, they'd be located in the daycare center, which used to be on Chestnut Street, and it's still there, but the sisters don't help it there anymore. But they'd live right inside their residence, and if it was teaching, they'd live inside a convent. If it were hospital work, they would live in a house behind the Providence Hospital. If it were social work, they'd live right next to it. But they do have one big mother house. Started in 1930 and finished 1932. They waited that long to get their own mother house because they always put money into other needs. And that mother house is still there. It's gorgeous. To me, it's one of the top 5 buildings in Holyoke in terms of great look to it. And it's very exclusive, set up back, so most people don't even know it's there anymore. And the sisters have started up so much. They started up things not in Holyoke, but in Springfield. They started up the Mercy Hospital. And in Worcester, they started up a hospital. In Greenfield, they started up a hospital. In Pittsfield, they started up a hospital. They started up a big orphanage in Holyoke for girls and boys, which served all of western Massachusetts and was always filled up. And they did so much around the area. It's hard to believe how much they could have done.
And really quick, before we continue with our interview, just to fill our listeners in, to find out more information, or if you're interested in signing up for any of his various tours, check out his website at holyokecanalstours.org. And there you can find videos and podcasts of the stops along each of his tours, as well as photos and text of the historical sites throughout as well. And for private tours and other inquiries, you can email him directly at bobcat4214, capital B, at yahoo.com. And his tours make for fun educational outdoor activities for families and group parties. So getting back to our interview, what do the Sisters of Providence still do in Holyoke?
They run homes for men that have addiction. They run the Broderick home, the McClary home, and they run Kate's Kitchen. They run a clothing store where you sell used clothing, and they run a clothes recycle store. They run a food pantry. All these, they found a niche market which the government hasn't taken over yet, and so they can still do their fine work around Holyoke. And not only, of course, not just Holyoke, but also in other places around the area. So what they still do is very different from what they used to do, but they change with the times, and they always reevaluate their situation as much as possible. The Broderick House is for men that are 2 years past drug addiction, and they found jobs out in the community, but they still need a supportive home to go to. The McClary House is very similar. They have one home that is above Kate's Kitchen. That's for men that are still within the first 2 years past addiction, and they need a little bit different kind of support, and the sisters provided for them. So they really do a lot. Also, they still help out in various hospitals. In the Mercy Hospital, they have a big wing devoted to one of the nuns. And so there's still a lot being done. They've left the orphanage business. They definitely left the teaching business, but they still find they're a little bit of a niche.
And what special events did the sisters celebrate in 2023?
That year, they celebrated the 150th year of their arrival in Holyoke, and they celebrated by inviting the mayor of Holyoke, Joshua Garcia, to give a speech to the group at the Mother House. This is the Providence still have their beautiful Mother House under somewhat of their control. And they invited him, and they had a banquet, and they had a speech, and it must have been a grand time. It was part of the 150th celebration of Holyoke. And the sisters still have not come to the 150th anniversary of their being their own order. So, sure, they might have come to Holyoke in 1873, but in 1891, they finally became their own order in the world of nuns, separate from the Kingston, Ontario group of Sisters of Providence. And their 150th anniversary for that will be in the year 2041. And I wish them great luck. That's quite an achievement to get an organization going for that long and be very vibrant and change with the times. And so I'm very proud of the nuns and all they've done in every location they've done it.
And thank you, Robert, for educating us on your tours and historical topics of your expertise. And of course, we want to thank our listeners for tuning in. And check out a large selection of our other podcasts at his website, as well as on SoundCloud.com. And be sure to stay up to date with new podcasts and videos posted daily. Thank you, and hope you join us again. Sisters of Providence. So, why is 2023 special for the Sisters of Providence?
This is the 150-year anniversary of the Sisters of Providence arrival in Holyoke. They came from Kingston, Ontario, under the instigation of Dr. J.J. O'Connor and Father Patrick Harkins. And they came as social workers, nurses, teachers. They really specialize social workers and nurses. And they had a special celebration this year. This 2023 is the 150th anniversary of Holyoke as a city also. And they had the mayor show up and give them a talk, and that's great. Now, they form their own order, and so that is very special. Now, we're going to talk about today what they have done for Holyoke, and then where they've been through the years and what their future will be like. But these are very special nuns. They were nuns that served the community, and they loved Holyoke and being in Holyoke, and Holyoke wanted them so much that they formed their own order of nuns, separate from the Sisters of Charity of Providence up in Ontario. And this is very unusual because there's only about 200 orders of nuns around the world, and one of them was formed in Holyoke.
And what have the Sisters of Providence done for the people of Holyoke?
Okay, they've run the Providence Hospital since its inception in 1873, and they also ran the orphanages, St. Vincent's Orphanage and the Brightside Orphanage for girls and boys. They also ran the elder homes, the home for elderly women from Patrick Harkin's donation, and the home for men called the Bevan Kelly Home. And they've done social work around Holyoke for years and years. They've also run Providence Ministries, have in the last half century, and that Providence Ministry runs Michelari House, the Broderick House. They run Kate's Kitchen, and they do this a very low page. They didn't make their own mother house. They did have convents, but they didn't have a mother house in Holyoke. Till 1930, they decided they had enough money. In 1932, that building was ready. It's a gorgeous building up in the Brightside sub-neighborhood of Holyoke. And so, thus, they've done a lot and will do a lot for Holyoke, and they're very special to Holyoke.
So quickly before we continue with the rest of getting back to our interview, what are some of the buildings that have been built for the sisters?
All right. They've served in many convents along the way. There was a convent, the convent of the Victory, up in Brightside, that served them for a while, but then it burned down. It, of course, was the mother house that has been completed since 1932, and thus is almost 90, is over 90 years old now. And other buildings include the Providence Hospital, whether it was the South Hadley rendition, the Holyoke rendition, or the one in Brightside area or Ingleside area. Those hospitals, the one downtown, was improved vastly for them. There also was many little places that weren't built for them, but were for them, including the Holy Day Nursery, where the sisters served for decades and decades there. And then also the convent downtown was built for them. It was at the St. Jerome's Church campus and served the boys, the teachers that taught the boys, and then it served for the unified campus of St. Jerome's School. So they've been around, and there's a lot of buildings left that served them.
And what will their future be like?
All right, their future in Holyoke is probably bright. There's still several nuns left, and they still are active. They still serve at the Broderick House and Kate's Kitchen, McClure House, and they are still heavily involved in social work around the area. They still run the Mercy Hospital in Springfield, and hopefully they'll stay around because they've been a great influence upon Holyoke, and I feel that they still have a job to do. They always find their niche no matter what it is.
Well, thank you, Robert, for educating us on your tours, and we want to thank our listeners again for tuning in. And you can also tune into a large selection of our other podcasts and much more at his website. And again, that's HolyokeCanalTour.org. And again, you can email him directly for private tours or to inquire about anything else at bobcat4214B@yahoo.com. And be sure to keep an eye out for his upcoming 2024 season tours and more as they become available. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for tuning into our podcast. We are coming to you from South Hadley, Massachusetts. I am your host, Carrie, and joining me is Holyoke's very own local historian and creator of the historical tours of Greater Holyoke, Robert Camus. He offers both public and private tours, as well as presentations of the local canal systems, reservoirs, cemeteries, and churches, as well as various parks and streets in Holyoke, South Hadley, and Chicopee, Mass. Now you actually lead these tours and give these presentations yourself, is that correct?
Yes, and this one was actually a charity of mine a long time ago.
And today he will be educating us on the Providence Ministry. So tell us about the Providence Ministry.
All right, the Sisters of Providence came from Ontario, from a town called Kingston in 1873, and they came to Holyoke, part of them, and that was because they knew that in Holyoke there were so many poor people, It was a heavily industrialized city, but lacked the resources to help the very poor. And they recruited here. Now, the question was, tell us about Providence Ministry. Well, in some sense, Providence Ministries has been with us since 1873. But in another sense, they've changed drastically through the years, through the centuries. And Providence Ministry really came probably from the 1970s, when they started up special resources for the poor people. They tried to approach it from a different sense. The Sisters of Providence were almost always the equivalent of social workers or nurses. Some of them were teachers in the very beginning, but they changed over. And they changed with the times too. When their needs changed, they would change. Sure, Providence Hospital was there, and lots of nurses from Sister Providence. But when, for instance, the orphanage wasn't needed as much, they started changing with the times. And they started to serve adults more than they did children. And this change in society, of course, there were fewer and fewer orphans and fewer foster children. And so the Providence Ministry, Sister Providence changed with the times. Now, by 1980, a lot of the nuns were devoted to helping adults of Holyoke and the surrounding communities. And I'll be telling you about the institutions along the way. And I'll tell you why this year of 2023 is special for these sisters. And then also, I'll explain the social situation around Holyoke.
So what institutions do they have around Holyoke?
All right, so I'll tell you about them. And there was one since 1980 called Kate's Kitchen. And Kate's Kitchen is where at noontime to 1 p.m. you can go in the basement of the Loretta House and get a free hot meal. And of course, people do take advantage of the situation. Why not? There's too many poor people in Holyoke still, and they need that food. A couple of times I went there just to see what the organization was about, and the meal's pretty good. Sometimes it's very good, sometimes just average. But this is just one of the many institutions. Another one is the St. Jude's Clothing Center, where if you get a letter from a head of one of the organizations around the Holyoke area that cater to people in need, then the St. Jude's Clothing Center can give you a certain amount of clothes, and they space it out so you can't get more than a few clothes every 4 months. And that's because they don't have enough to go around. They accept donations, of course, and any extra clothes that is torn or soiled beyond use is given to a person that will give them money for their clothes. There's also Margaret's Pantry, where if you go there, I think once a week you can go there and they'll give you a small amount of food, enough to get by for a few days. They try to make it 4 days worth of food. And the pantry is free, whereas St. Jude's closing store, you need to pay a small amount of money. All right, now, the next three organizations are all such that they mostly cater to men that are recovering from a drug addiction or alcohol addiction. And I'll tell you about the one that accepts men that are just out of recovery. It's called Loretta House. It's on Hamilton Street, and it's about 30 rooms there. And it's supported both by the administration and supported by the men that are there. They support each other. And you have to be within the first year of your recovery, and you have to have a job that you go to. So you're trying to develop a life for yourself, job, room, support. Now, once you get beyond 1 year of being in a house like this, where you've been sober and have a job for more than 1 year, you can go up to 1 or 2 houses. The first one is the Broderick House, and here it's much more community-based than the next one I'll talk about. But the Broderick House is on the corner of Clementi Street and Cabot Street. And the Broderick House has about 30 rooms also. They accept mostly men, but there are a few women there. And each man will get their own room, but there's community rooms. And you have to be involved there, not only have a job for at least a year, not only be sober for at least a year, you have to be devoted to helping the other men there. So it's strongly community based. And then you develop, and of course, you have to pay part of your income into the Broderick House. But otherwise, you try to develop. You go out alternate day, not only to the house, to your work, but also visit friends and family, and try to get a regular life for yourself. And then there's the McCleary House, or McCleary Manor, which is beyond the former Providence Hospital, and it's still in the land of Providence. And there, it's also it's very close to Broderick House, except that sure you need 1 year of sobriety, you need 1 year of having a job, but the amount of community involvement is lowered. So the support level, by design, because you're getting better, is not as high as the Broderick House. So they want to try to see if you can progress to a life that doesn't depend upon the Sisters of Providence or Providence Ministries, but you can go find an apartment somewhere else on your own. And this is a wonderful program. Now, there's one other program. It's called the Food Works. And this is a work program at Cake's Kitchen where you work as a chef or a chef's aide or as a cook, and you try to get yourself involved in a new occupation which you can learn and then progress outside the walls of this community.
And so, for interview, why is this a special year for the Sisters of Providence?
All right, in the year 1873, the Sisters of Providence came from Kingston, Ontario, and they ended up developing their own order of nuns. That's right, one of the 2,000 orders of nuns around the world, one of them is started in Holyoke. And this year, 2023, is 150 years since they arrived in Holyoke. So it's a very special year for the nuns.
And why are there so many needy people around Holyoke?
All right, big question. People that are addicted to alcohol or drugs usually don't have a place to live. They usually have to stay close to where there's a lot of drug dealers. And sadly, Holyoke is one of those communities. And it's like a magnet. So if you go around asking the drug addicted people in Holyoke, where were you born, where you were raised, where were you living 5 or 10 years ago, they won't say Holyoke. Almost all of them will say the communities around Holyoke are spread across almost all of the 3 counties in the Connecticut River Valley, Hampshire, Hampden, and Franklin counties. They will never tell you, oh, I was raised in Holyoke, because they weren't. It's like a magnet. And Springfield's this way too. Other communities around don't have this problem. So why are there so many needed people? Because of that reason. Now there's also the question of, there's so many immigrants or people from outside the state that come to Holyoke because the level of rent is lower and the welfare, the ability to get welfare is easier in Massachusetts. It's on a better level. And so you get people that are needy by virtue of them being just poor. And so Providence Ministry caters to these kind of people, whether it's through clothing, food, getting an occupation for themselves, or through helping addicted men. Now, what about addicted women? Well, Providence Ministry found out a long time ago that welfare caters to women better than men. And they also found out there was a lot of groups in Springfield were willing, but nothing for men. And so these 3 organizations where men can live started in Holyoke.
And thank you, Robert, for educating us on your tours, and we want to thank our listeners for tuning in. You can also tune in to a large selection of our other podcasts and much more at his website. Again, that's holyokecanaltour.org. And again, you can email him directly for private tours or to inquire about anything else at bobcat42 capital B, at yahoo.com. And be sure to keep an eye out for its upcoming 2024 season tours and more as they become available. Thank you for tuning in.